Let me ask you something nobody in the tiny house world asks out loud. It's easy to fall in love with a tiny house on a Tuesday afternoon watching YouTube videos. The light through those big windows, the clever storage, the freedom, the no mortgage life, all of it. It looks like the answer to everything. But what about 10 years from now? What about when your knees aren't what they used to be and you're climbing that loft ladder at midnight? What about when you meet someone and they can't stand sleeping in 200 square feet? What about when you've parked in 5 different states and you've run out of places that will legally let you stay? What about when the wanderlust fades and you just want roots? Would you actually live in a tiny house forever? Not in theory, not in a Pinterest board. Actually, for the rest of your life. Because I've done the research. I've talked to people who love it, people who left it, people who built their entire identity around it, and then quietly moved back into a regular house and didn't tell anyone. And I've also found the people who are still there, 10, 15 years in, and genuinely would not trade it for anything. Today we are going to answer this question honestly. No hype, no Instagram filter, just the real truth about whether tiny house living is a forever decision or the most beautiful temporary chapter of your life. Stay with me, because the answer might surprise you. Subscribe and hit that notification bell right now, because this channel is the place for honest, real-world tiny living content that nobody else is making. And stay all the way to the end of this video, because I'm going to give you a very specific framework for figuring out whether you personally are built for tiny living forever or whether it's the perfect 5-year plan. You'll want that. Let's go. Before we get into the emotional and psychological truth of living tiny forever, let's start with the numbers, because the financial case for tiny living in 2026 is genuinely extraordinary, and it deserves to be stated clearly. The average traditional home in the United States now costs over $420,000. Median home prices have exceeded $420,000 in 2026, and in cities like San Francisco, Austin, or New York, you can double or triple that number. A well-built tiny house on a foundation between $50,000 and $120,000. A tiny house on wheels, often between $30,000 and $80,000. Even at the top of the range, you're spending less than a third of what a traditional home costs. But the cost savings don't stop at purchase. A tiny home typically consumes 54% less energy than a conventionally sized house. A 300 square foot space needs 70 to 90% less heating and cooling energy than a home between 1,500 and 2,000 square feet. Off-grid solar setups can drop electric bills to between $0 and $30 per month versus $200 or more for average homes. Roof replacement. A 200 square foot roof costs between $2,000 and $4,000 every 20 to 30 years. A traditional home, $15,000 or more. Monthly total costs in a tiny house, covering lot rent, utilities, insurance, and maintenance, typically run between $800 and $2,000, depending on location and setup. Off-grid on rural land, some owners manage between $400 and $600 per month total. What does that gap do to your life? When you're not spending 35 to 40% of your income on housing, you have savings in your bank account. Some people pay off student loans. Some quit jobs they hate. Some work part-time and spend the rest doing things they actually like. That financial breathing room is not a small thing. It changes the texture of daily life. And here's the number that really gets me. 73% of Americans say they would consider living in a tiny home, citing affordability and minimalism as the top reasons. That's not a fringe movement anymore. That's a majority of the country looking at housing costs and saying, there has to be another way. There is, but another way doesn't mean perfect. So let's talk about the full picture. Let me introduce you to the profile of a person who genuinely lives in a tiny house forever and thrives. Because this person exists, and understanding who they are will help you figure out whether you're one of them. The financial freedom seeker. The number one reason people stay in tiny houses long-term is financial. Not just the lower mortgage, the freedom that comes with it. When your housing costs are $600 a month instead of $2,500 a month, you have choices that most people simply don't have. You can work fewer hours. You can build savings faster. You can take risks in your career or business that you couldn't take if you had a $2,500 a month housing payment waiting for you every 30 days. One of the most compelling psychological benefits of tiny home living is the sense of freedom it provides. Downsizing allows individuals to work fewer hours, travel more frequently, and pursue their passions or hobbies. This freedom enhances happiness, reduces stress, and fosters a sense of adventure and independence. For people who value time and experience over square footage, this is not a compromise. This is a deliberate upgrade. The minimalist. The second profile is the committed minimalist, someone who has genuinely, deeply made peace with owning less. A study published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology found that people reported feeling more relaxed and less anxious in organized spaces. Living in a tiny house forces that organization. Everything you own has a purpose. Everything has a place. The visual calm is constant. Tiny homeowners typically consume over 54% less than the average person, not just in energy, but in purchasing, in consumption, in stuff. And for people who've made that mental shift, who genuinely find more peace and less, tiny living doesn't feel like restriction. It feels like relief. The environmentally driven. The third long-term tiny house liver is the person for whom this is a values decision. Not just financial, not just aesthetic, ethical. Tiny houses use fewer materials to build, consume less energy, and encourage owners to downsize and live intentionally. For environmentally conscious individuals, tiny homes align with values of reducing waste and minimizing carbon footprints. When your house is literally smaller, your carbon footprint is literally smaller. That's not a metaphor. That's physics. And for people who feel a genuine moral responsibility to live more lightly on the earth, tiny living is not a sacrifice. It's an expression of who they are. Those people don't leave. The retiree. And then there's a fourth profile that doesn't get talked about enough. The retiree. A well-designed single-level tiny house. No loft, no stairs, full bathroom, all utilities, is in many ways ideal for aging. Lower maintenance, lower cost, smaller cleaning burden, the ability to relocate, to be closer to family as needs change without selling a property first, and on a fixed retirement income. The difference between a $600 a month housing cost and a $2,000 a month housing cost is the difference between financial security and financial stress for the rest of your life. This is one of the fastest growing segments of tiny house buyers in 2026. People 55 and older who look at what they're carrying in a large family home, the maintenance, the taxes, the utility costs, and decide they've been carrying it for other people's benefit, not their own. Now, the honest part, because this is where most tiny house content either goes silent or gets defensive, and I refuse to do that. People leave tiny houses, regularly, quietly, often without posting about it. And the reasons are real, consistent, and worth taking seriously before you make this decision. Reason number 1, relationships. The number one reason couples leave tiny houses is not the square footage. It's the privacy, or rather, the complete absence of it. With 2 people in a 200 square foot home, carrying on private phone conversations is near impossible. Getting alone time, even in the bathroom, disappears. One real-world tiny house resident described this bluntly and memorably, saying there's simply no private space left. This isn't a design problem you can solve with a better floor plan. It's a fundamental reality of shared small space. For some couples, the closeness becomes a source of intimacy. For others, especially introverts who need genuine alone time to function, it becomes a source of relentless friction. The honest question before going tiny with a partner: do we actually like being in the same room all day? Not in theory, in reality. Because in a tiny house, that's the only option. Reason number 2, children. Children change the calculus of tiny living dramatically, and the transition often happens faster than people plan for. Living in a tiny house with kids is possible, but genuinely demanding. It requires careful layout planning, separate sleeping areas, and a level of organization and routine discipline that most families with young children are simply not able to maintain. The challenges of tiny home living tend to peak when children hit school age, when they need space for homework, for friends to come over, for the natural chaos of childhood that simply cannot be contained in 250 square feet. Families who do it successfully tend to do so with designs that create genuine spatial separation. like the gooseneck layouts with separate loft areas, and with land access that gives children outdoor space that compensates for indoor limits. Without both of those, it becomes very hard, very fast. Reason number 3, land and zoning. This is the reason that surprises people most, because it's not romantic or emotional, it's bureaucratic, and it is relentless. A park ranger who has lived in a 280 square foot tiny home since 2018 and moved several times due to her job describes this clearly. The biggest challenge every time is finding a place to put the home. She has lived on a vineyard, in a friend's yard, and in an RV park. Finding legal, affordable land near major cities remains genuinely difficult. Zoning codes, building regulations, and insurance rules in many areas still lag behind the tiny house movement in 2026. Banks rarely issue standard mortgages for tiny houses. Insurance runs between $600 and $1,500 per year as a specialty coverage because most companies still treat tiny homes on wheels more like RVs than houses. The people who leave tiny living because of this aren't people who stopped loving the lifestyle. They're people who got exhausted fighting a system that wasn't designed for them. That's a real thing, and it doesn't mean tiny living is wrong. It means the preparation work up front matters enormously. Reason number 4, the unexpected emotional reality. Here's one nobody talks about, the quiet identity crisis that comes with tiny living after the novelty wears off. Debates concerning the desirability of small home living increased during the pandemic when many micro-apartment and small home occupants reported a sense of life merging into one. Boredom, and in some cases anxiety and stress, exacerbated by the inability to vary their use of space. In a tiny house, your kitchen is your office, is your living room, is your dining room. When you can't leave the house, due to weather, illness, or circumstance, you are trapped in one continuous space with no variation in your environment. That spatial sameness has a measurable psychological cost. The people who manage this best are the ones who design deliberate outdoor living space as an extension of the home, who live in mild climates, and who have very active external social lives. But if your tiny house is your primary world, over time, that can grind on even the most committed minimalists. Here's the thing I want to say plainly that most tiny house content won't say. Tiny living might be the best 5 years of your life, and not the right forever answer. And that is completely fine. The people who approach tiny living as a chapter, a deliberate, intentional, time-limited chapter where they slash their costs, build savings, pay off debt, travel, recalibrate what they value, and then use that platform to make a bigger next move. Those people almost universally report that it worked exactly as intended. One family story is typical of this pattern. They placed their tiny home on a lot outside Austin, Texas. They lived there. They saved. And eventually they bought a traditional house in Oregon and moved their tiny home to the backyard, renting out the main property to earn extra income. The tiny house didn't end. It evolved. It became a tool in a larger financial strategy. That's not failure. That is tiny living working exactly as it should. The tiny house gave them leverage they didn't have before. They used it. Equally, the person who lives in a thoughtfully designed, legally placed, financially considered tiny home for 30 years and dies having spent a fraction of their peers' housing costs, with savings instead of mortgage debt, with time instead of a commute. That person also made exactly the right choice. The answer to "would you live here forever" is less about the tiny house and more about you. Your personality, your relationships, your career, your values, your definition of freedom. So let's figure that out. Alright, I promised you a framework for figuring out whether tiny living is your forever or your chapter. Here it is. Be brutally honest with yourself on each one. Question 1. How do you actually feel about stuff? Not how you think you should feel. How you actually feel. Because tiny living demands a genuine, deep, non-negotiable relationship with owning less. If you feel anxiety at the idea of getting rid of things, not things you use, but things you might use someday, tiny living will grind you down. Every single day. If you feel relief when you get rid of things, if clearing out genuinely makes you feel lighter, cleaner, freer, you are wired for this lifestyle. Question 2. Do you need solitude or space to function? There's a difference between these two things. Solitude means being alone with your thoughts. You can achieve that in a tiny house. Space means physical distance between yourself and other people. You cannot achieve that in a tiny house when someone else is living in it. If you're an introvert who recharges by being in a separate room from other people, and you plan to share a tiny house with a partner or family, have this conversation before you buy. Because you cannot design your way around the fact that 200 square feet is 200 square feet. Question 3. Is your lifestyle stable or expanding? Tiny houses work beautifully for people whose lifestyle is stable or deliberately simplifying. They work very hard for people whose life is likely to expand. New partner, children, career growth that brings home office needs, aging parents who might need a room. This doesn't mean don't do it. It means go in with your eyes open about what triggers an exit. Know what the next step looks like before you commit. Have a plan for when life changes. Question 4. Have you done the land work? Do you have a specific legal location for your home? Not, I'm looking. Nah, I think I can find somewhere. A specific, confirmed, legally compliant place. The people who thrive in tiny houses long-term almost always have a stable land situation, a piece of land they own, a long-term community lease, a secure foundation placement, the instability of figuring out where to park it next, wears people down faster than any other factor in tiny living. Land security equals life security in this lifestyle. Question 5. What is your relationship with the outdoors? Your tiny house will feel dramatically different depending on whether you treat your outdoor space as an extension of your living area or as the weather outside your window. People who thrive long-term in tiny houses almost universally have a covered deck, a garden, a defined outdoor living zone, something that doubles their functional living space when the weather allows. If you're planning to place your tiny house in an environment where outdoor living is limited, dense urban lots, harsh climates with many months of unlivable outdoor temperatures, your interior square footage is your world. Plan accordingly. Question 6. Are you doing this for something or running from something? This is the most important question on the list, and the hardest to answer honestly. Tiny living undertaken as a positive pursuit, financial freedom, environmental values, deliberate minimalism, mobility, and adventure has a strong track record of lasting satisfaction. Tiny living undertaken to escape something, a relationship, a career crisis, financial desperation, a vague sense of dissatisfaction with life, tends to fail because the tiny house doesn't fix what you're running from. It just changes the scenery. The people who find themselves quietly moving back into a traditional house after 2 years are often the ones who went tiny for the wrong reasons. And the people still happily in their tiny homes a decade later almost always went tiny for the right ones. So, would you live in a tiny house forever? Maybe, and I mean that sincerely. If you're financially motivated, genuinely minimalist, have a stable land situation, a partner who's fully aligned, and you've done the honest self-work of understanding your own relationship with space and stuff, tiny living can be one of the best decisions you make in your entire life. The data backs that up. The people living it back that up. If you're in a chapter of life that's actively expanding, if children, relationships, career changes, or family needs are on the horizon, tiny living might be the most powerful short to medium term financial and lifestyle strategy you've ever used. And then it becomes the foundation for whatever comes next. Neither answer is failure. Both are wisdom. The only wrong answer is the one you give yourself without being honest first. Drop a comment below and tell me, is this your forever or your chapter, and why? I genuinely read every single one, and I'm going to make a follow-up video based on your answers. If you want to go deeper, I've got a full video right here on exactly where you can legally put a tiny house in 2026, state by state, because before any of this works, you need to solve a land question. That video is right there. Subscribe if you haven't. New videos every week, and I'll see you in the next one.